For 40 years, your money has moved in one direction, into the 401k, into the IRA, into savings. Then you retire, and it has to start moving the other way. And here's the strange part, nobody ever shows you how. Which account do you tap first? How much comes out each month? And what do you do when the market drops right after your last paycheck? Today we build a retirement paycheck from scratch. One couple, $600,000, every step on screen. Welcome to the Retirement Lab. I'm Susan Mitchell, and before we start, my usual reminder, I'm not a financial advisor, and this is not personal advice. This is a lab. We run the numbers so you can see how the machine works, and then you check everything against your own situation. Here is what I've noticed after years of reading about this stuff. There are thousands of videos about saving for retirement. Index funds, contribution limits, compound growth. The accumulation side is covered from every possible angle. But the moment you actually retire, the advice just sort of stops. It's like being handed the keys to a car nobody taught you to drive. And the result is real. Some people retire with plenty of money and still feel broke because they never built a system for paying themselves. They tiptoe around their own savings like it belongs to someone else. Others do the opposite. They pull big chunks out whenever they need something, in whatever order feels easy, and quietly hand the IRS thousands of dollars they never had to give up. So today we're doing the thing that viewers keep asking for in the comments of every big retirement channel. A walkthrough. Start to finish. Not theory, not a lecture on the 4% rule, but the actual plumbing, where the money sits, how it moves, and what lands in your checking account on the first of the month. Let me introduce you to our case for today. Tom and Carol are both 66. They just retired, and here is their whole financial life on one page. They have $600,000 saved. It sounds like one number, but it's really three. About $430,000 sits in pre-tax accounts, Tom's old 401k, and a rollover IRA. Another $120,000 is in a regular taxable brokerage account they built up over the years. And $50,000 is in a Roth IRA, the money that already had its taxes paid. On top of that, Social Security pays them $2,900 a month combined. That number is theirs as of 2026. Yours will be different, and you can see it anytime by logging into your account at ssa.gov. Now the spending side. Tom and Carol tracked their expenses for 6 months before retiring, which I would beg every single one of you to do, because guessing is how plans fail. And they did it the unglamorous way. Carol printed the bank and card statements, sat down with a highlighter, and sorted every line into keeps, quits, and surprises. The quits were subscriptions and a storage unit nobody had visited since 2022. The surprises were the quiet ones, the insurance premiums and the annual bills that never feel like spending until you add them up. When the highlighting was done, their real life costs about $4,900 a month. The mortgage is paid off. That number covers property taxes, groceries, insurance, the cars, and enough eating out to feel like a life. So here is the whole problem in one line. $4,900 going out. $2,900 coming in from Social Security. The gap is $2,000 a month, and their $600,000 has to produce it. $2,000 a month is $24,000 a year, which happens to be 4% of their savings. That's a workable ask. Not automatic, not guaranteed, but workable. The rest of this episode is how they actually collect it. The first move is almost embarrassingly simple, and it changes everything. Tom and Carol pick one checking account and declare it the paycheck account. Every dollar they spend flows out of that account and nowhere else. Then, they set up one automatic transfer. On the first of every month, $2,000 moves from their savings system into that checking account. Same amount, same day, every month. Right next to the Social Security deposit that already lands there. Why does this matter so much? Because it turns an impossible question into a familiar one. Can we afford this? Is paralyzing when the answer means staring at a $600,000 balance and doing math about the next 30 years. But when there's $4,900 in checking and it refills every month, you already know the answer. You've been answering it your whole working life. It's called a paycheck. I think about a woman named Ruth who lived across the street from us for years. She retired from the school district office with about $300,000 saved, which for her life was genuinely enough. But that first winter, she wouldn't touch it. She ate through her checking account, skipped her sister's birthday trip, and told me at the mailbox that she felt poor. Ruth wasn't poor. She just had no system that gave her permission to spend. A monthly transfer is exactly that. Permission on a schedule. One practical note. Set the transfer to arrive a few days before your big bills come due, and let Social Security and the transfer land in the same account. One inbox for income. It makes everything downstream easier to watch. Now, where does that $2,000 a month actually come from? Not straight from the stock market. That's the mistake that turns a bad year into a bad retirement. Tom and Carol set up what I call a cash runway. 18 months of planned withdrawals, sitting in cash. 18 months times $2,000 is $36,000. They keep it split between a high-yield savings account and a short-term treasury fund at the same brokerage. Boring on purpose. As of 2026, cash like that still earns a real interest rate, which is a nice bonus, but the yield is not the point. Check current rates when you set up your own. Where exactly does it sit? The first 6 months of transfers, $12,000, live in the high-yield savings account that feeds the paycheck account directly. The other $24,000 sits in that short-term treasury fund, earning a little more while it waits its turn. Some retirees go one step further and build a small ladder of treasury bills, one maturing every few months, so cash keeps arriving on schedule no matter what. Any of these works. The only rule is that runway money is never in stocks. The moment you reach for extra yield with it, it stops being a runway. The point is what the runway does to their nerves. Remember the question from the cold open. What happens when the market drops right after your last paycheck? For Tom and Carol, the honest answer is now, nothing. The next 18 monthly transfers are already sitting in cash. Nothing has to be sold at the bottom. Their stocks and funds can spend a year and a half underwater without touching this month's groceries. If you watched our last episode on sequence of returns risk, this is the practical defense. The danger was never that markets fall. They always fall eventually. The danger was being forced to sell into the fall. A runway means you're never forced. How long should yours be? 12 months is a common floor. Some people sleep better with 24. Tom and Carol chose 18 because it covers the average bear market recovery with room to spare, without leaving too much money sitting out of the market. That's a judgment call, not a law of physics. Pick the number that lets you stop checking your phone every time the news gets loud. A runway only works if you refill it, so Tom and Carol give it a rule. Once a quarter, on the first weekend of January, April, July, and October, they top the cash bucket back up to 18 months. That's the entire maintenance schedule. 4 short sessions a year at the kitchen table. What do they sell to do it? Whatever has grown past its target. Their investments are set up as a simple mix, roughly 60% stock funds and 40% bond funds. If stocks had a good quarter and now they're overweight, they trim stocks. If bonds are the thing that's swollen, they trim bonds. Refilling the runway and rebalancing the portfolio turn out to be the same chore. You are always, automatically, selling whatever is high. And if it's been an ugly quarter and everything is down, they sell nothing. That's the whole reason the runway is 18 months long. They let the cash carry the paycheck and give the markets time to get up off the floor. In a long bear market, the runway shortens quarter by quarter, and that's fine. That's the job it was hired to do. When markets recover, the first order of business is building it back. Notice what has quietly disappeared from their life, the daily decision. Nobody is asking, should we sell something this week? The calendar asks 4 times a year, and the answer comes from a rule they wrote down when they were calm. Now for the part that separates a decent plan from an expensive one. When the refill rule says sell, which account do you actually pull from? The order matters more than almost anyone realizes because every account is taxed differently. The baseline order that works for most situations is this: taxable brokerage first, pre-tax accounts second, Roth last. Why taxable first? Because it's the gentlest tax bill. When Tom and Carol sell from the brokerage account, they only owe tax on the growth, not the whole withdrawal. And as of 2026, a retired couple with income in their range pays a 0% federal rate on a good chunk of long-term capital gains. 0. Some of their early retirement money comes out nearly tax-free. Verify the current brackets at irs.gov because the numbers move every year. Why pre-tax second and steadily? Because every dollar from the 401k and IRA is taxed as ordinary income, and the tax brackets are a staircase. Pull a modest amount every year and you stay on the low steps. Pull a huge chunk in 1 year and you leap up the staircase and pay the higher rate on the top of that pile. Let me make that concrete, because this is where real money burns. Say Tom decides to grab $60,000 from the IRA all at once for a motorhome. Stacked on top of their other income, a chunk of that withdrawal lands 2 brackets higher than usual. Compared with spreading the same $60,000 over 3 calendar years, that single impatient move cost them roughly $5,000 to $6,000 in extra federal tax. Same money, same motorhome, one avoidable tip to the IRS. Do that a few times across retirement and you've quietly donated a year of paychecks. And why does the Roth go last? Because it's the only account growing completely tax-free, so you want it compounding as long as possible. It's also the most flexible money for surprises, and the kindest account to leave behind for kids, since as of 2026, they inherit it without an income tax bill. The Roth is the dessert. You don't eat it first. At this point, Tom and Carol have a paycheck, a runway, a refill schedule, and an order. The last piece is knowing when the plan itself needs to bend. Viewers ask this constantly, and fair enough, because most videos say stay flexible and never say what flexible means. So here are actual numbers. Once a year, in their birthday month, Tom and Carol compare their total portfolio to where it started. $600,000 is the anchor. If the portfolio has fallen more than 20% below the anchor, so under $480,000, they trim the monthly transfer by 10%. $2,000 becomes $1,800. That's the whole cut. $200 a month, which for them means fewer restaurant nights and a cheaper vacation, not a crisis. They hold there until the portfolio climbs back over the line. If the portfolio has grown more than 20% above the anchor, so past $720,000, they give themselves a 10% raise. $2,000 becomes $2,200 and the anchor resets. Raises are allowed. This is the part everyone forgets. The plan has to pay you more in the good times, or you'll be the richest person in the cemetery. In between those two lines, they change nothing. No reacting to headlines, no adjusting because a neighbor got nervous. 1 check a year, 2 trigger numbers, small moves. Small early adjustments are exactly why they'll never be forced into big late ones. My Uncle Gene never had guardrails, and I watched what that costs. He retired in 2007 with a decent nest egg and no rules at all. When 2008 hit, every evening news broadcast felt like a personal emergency, and one Friday in October, he sold everything, right into the bottom, and put it in cash for good. The market came back within a few years. Gene never did. It wasn't a math failure. He could do math fine. It was the absence of a rule written down in calm weather that could speak for him in the storm. 2 trigger numbers on an index card would have saved him 6 figures. That's all guardrails are, your calm self, on paper, outvoting your frightened self. Now, your life is not Tom and Carol's, so let me show you which dials move. If you're single, the machine is identical, just with 1 Social Security check instead of 2. Your gap number is usually bigger relative to your savings, So the guardrails matter even more, and I'll say it plainly since so many of you have asked. We will run a full single-person case on this channel soon. If you rent, your spending number needs a growth assumption because rent rises in a way a paid-off house doesn't. If one of you has a pension, congratulations, your gap shrinks and your runway can often be shorter. And if you're retiring at 62 before Social Security starts, the runway has to carry the whole paycheck for a few years, not just the gap, which usually means a bigger cash bucket and a harder look at whether the portfolio can afford the weight. Different inputs, same machine. 2 housekeeping items before we put it all together, and both come with the same instruction: verify at irs.gov because the rules move. First, withholding. A paycheck from an employer had taxes taken out automatically. Your homemade paycheck doesn't, unless you ask. When Tom and Carol withdraw from the pre-tax accounts, they have their brokerage hold back about 10% for federal tax, so April never brings a nasty surprise. You can also pay estimated taxes quarterly. Either works. Ignoring it does not. Second, required minimum distributions. As of 2026, once you reach age 73, the government requires you to start pulling money out of pre-tax accounts every year, whether you need it or not. For Tom and Carol, that's 7 years away, and here's the quiet benefit of their withdrawal order. By drawing the pre-tax accounts steadily through their 60s, they're shrinking the pile that future RMDs are calculated on. The couple who saves the IRA, untouched for last, often meets a much bigger forced withdrawal, at a much worse bracket, at 73. So let's stand back and watch the machine run. On the first of the month, $2,900 of Social Security and a $2,000 transfer land in the paycheck account. $4,900 in, $4,900 out. 4 times a year they refill the runway by trimming whatever grew. Once a year, they check 2 guardrail numbers. That is the entire operating manual for a $600,000 retirement. Tom told Carol the first transfer felt strange, like spending money they weren't supposed to touch. By the 3rd month, it just felt like payday again. That's the real product here, not a spreadsheet. The Tuesday morning feeling that the bills are handled and the coffee is paid for. Because here's what I've come to believe this whole subject is actually about. It was never really about the market or the perfect withdrawal percentage. It's about the fact that for your entire adult life, money arrived with a rhythm, and spending felt safe inside that rhythm. Retirement doesn't take away your money, it takes away the rhythm. Every step we built today, the account, the runway, the refill, the order, the guardrails, is just a way of giving the rhythm back. People who feel confident in retirement aren't the ones with the biggest balance. They're the ones who wrote themselves the paycheck. Your homework is one small thing. This week, figure out your own gap number, what your life costs per month, minus what's promised to you from Social Security or a pension. That one number is the beginning of your entire plan, and I'd love to hear it, or your first paycheck account story, down in the comments. If this walkthrough helped, subscribing genuinely helps us make the next one, and there's a full playlist of our other lab cases on screen. All figures are as of 2026, and this is education, not advice, so run your own numbers with your own professional before you move real money. I'm Susan Mitchell. Run your numbers. Know you're on track. I'll see you in the next one.